Imagine living in a century where a simple bus ride could end in an explosion, where a plane could vanish mid-flight, and where dictators used fear to silence entire nations. That was the 20th century, the age when terrorism went global. In our previous episode, we uncovered the dark origins of terror, but the 20th century would take this to an entirely new level. Terrorism would no longer be just an act of violence in the shadows. It would become global, theatrical, and amplified by the modern media. The terror of the dagger and the bomb now shared the stage with airplanes, cameras, and entire populations held hostage by ideology. This is the story of how the 20th century turned terrorism into a spectacle of fear. At the beginning of the century, empires were crumbling and nations were rising, but the birth of identity often came wrapped in blood. In Ireland, the Irish Republican Army, better known as the IRA, waged a brutal campaign against British rule. Bombings, assassinations, ambushes. For decades, Northern Ireland became a battlefield where ordinary citizens lived in constant fear of sudden explosions in pubs, bus stations, or shopping centers. The 1972 Bloody Friday attacks in Belfast saw 22 bombs detonated in less than 2 hours. 9 people were killed, more than 100 injured. The message was unmistakable: Britain would pay a price for its presence in Ireland. Spain, too, carried its own scars. The Basque separatist group ETA sought independence through violence. They planted car bombs, kidnapped politicians, and assassinated officials. In 1973, a meticulously planned attack killed Prime Minister Luis Carrero Blanco, the right-hand man of dictator Francisco Franco. The explosion was so powerful that it sent his car flying over a 5-story building. For many, this attack symbolized ETA's capacity to strike at the very heart of power. These nationalist movements thrived in environments where communities felt marginalized, discriminated, or denied self-determination. Their violence was not random. It was symbolic, designed to force governments into negotiation through fear. But nationalism was only one side of the coin. The ideological storms of the 20th century created their own armies of terror. On the far left, groups like the Red Brigades in Italy and the Red Army faction in Germany declared war on what they saw as capitalist oppression. Their targets were businessmen, judges, and political leaders. In 1978, the Red Brigades kidnapped and murdered Aldo Moro, Italy's former prime minister, after holding him captive for 55 days. Despite appeals from across the political spectrum, they executed him and left his body in the trunk of a car in Rome. The killing shocked Italy and revealed the ruthless determination of revolutionary groups. In Germany, the Baader-Meinhof Gang attacked military bases, assassinated officials, and bombed corporate offices. They believed terror could ignite revolution, but what they mostly ignited was fear, an atmosphere in which ordinary Germans felt that their own streets had become battlefields in a war they never chose. On the far right, terrorism took the form of paramilitary groups, death squads, and state-backed repression. Latin America in the 1970s and 1980s became a laboratory of terror. In Argentina, Chile, and elsewhere, military dictatorships disappeared thousands of dissidents. People were kidnapped off the streets, tortured, and executed, their bodies often dumped in rivers or the sea. This was terrorism from above, designed to silence entire societies through fear. Yet no form of 20th century terror captured the world's attention quite like the hijacking of airplanes. In the 1960s and 70s, the skies became a new battleground. The Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP, pioneered spectacular hijackings. In 1970, they seized multiple planes in what became known as the Dawson's Field hijackings. The images of commercial jets lined up on a desert airstrip in Jordan were broadcast across the world. Terrorism had entered the age of television. Perhaps the most dramatic rescue came in 1976, when an Air France plane was hijacked en route from Tel Aviv to Paris and forced to land in Entebbe, Uganda. Israeli commandos launched a daring operation to free the hostages. The raid was successful, but the spectacle underscored the terrifying vulnerability of modern travel. For years, hijackings became so common that boarding an international flight carried the shadow of uncertainty. The airplane, symbol of globalization, had become a flying stage for terror, but nothing illustrated the merging of terror and global media like the 1972 Munich Olympics. Palestinian militants from the group Black September stormed the Olympic Village, killing 2 Israeli athletes and taking 9 others hostage. For 21 hours, the world watched in shock as the drama unfolded on live television. The games, meant to celebrate peace and unity, became a theater of blood. Every image was broadcast in real time. Armed men on balconies, blindfolded hostages glimpsed through windows, negotiators moving nervously across the complex. Millions of viewers, from Europe to the United States, sat glued to their screens, witnessing terrorism not as an abstract headline, but as a living, breathing event. The crisis ended in a botched rescue attempt that left all 9 hostages dead, along with 5 of the attackers and a German police officer. The Munich massacre marked a turning point. It showed terrorists that a single act, if broadcast to millions, could shake the conscience of the entire world. The Cold War turned terrorism into a proxy battlefield. The United States and the Soviet Union often funded or armed groups that aligned with their interests. What for one side was a freedom fighter, for the other was a terrorist. Beyond weapons and money, both superpowers weaponized narratives. Washington portrayed insurgent groups backed by Moscow as ruthless terrorists threatening democracy, while the USSR framed Western-backed factions as valiant resistance movements fighting imperialism. The battlefield was not only in jungles or deserts, it was also in newspapers, radio, and diplomatic speeches. Terrorist acts became propaganda tools in a larger ideological war, where every explosion or hijacking could be spun as proof of an enemy's cruelty or of a cause's legitimacy. In Latin America, insurgent groups like the FARC in Colombia combined guerrilla warfare with kidnappings and bombings. In the Middle East, factions received money, weapons, and training from global powers. The result was a world where terror was not just local, it was international, connected by the invisible threads of ideology and geopolitics. But if groups like the IRA or ETA sowed fear from below, the 20th century also gave us chilling examples of states that used terror from above. Argentina's military dictatorship, 1976 to 1983, orchestrated a campaign of disappearances. An estimated 30,000 people vanished. Mothers still march in Buenos Aires' Plaza de Mayo with pictures of their missing children. In Chile, Pinochet's regime used secret police to silence opposition, spreading fear through torture centers and midnight arrests. This was terrorism disguised as government. By the late 20th century, terrorism was no longer confined to local conflicts. It had become a global language of fear. Television carried images of hijacked planes, massacres, and bombings straight into living rooms. For the first time, terror was not only experienced by the direct victims, it was shared by millions of viewers who felt the fear secondhand. The media, intentionally or not, became a multiplier. Terrorists knew this. Every act was staged not only for immediate destruction, but also for the cameras. The 20th century showed that terrorism could adapt to any ideology, any cause, any battlefield. But as the century closed, a new and more radical form of terrorism emerged. It would not be led by nationalist separatists or leftist revolutionaries. It would be born in the mountains of Afghanistan, shaped by holy war and fueled by global networks. Its defining act would come on a September morning in 2001 when the world watched 2 towers fall in New York City. The age of religious terrorism had arrived, and that is the story we will tell in the next episode. If you found this episode insightful, support the channel by hitting like and subscribing to Global Vertigo.